just going to jump right in because I said at the very beginning, each week and next week, I really hope you'll come. I hope you come every night. But I said at the start, we started way out here with origins of Baptist life. Last week, distinctives, doctrine, beliefs, sacraments, a lot of those kind of things. But tonight we start really getting, and then next week we will talk about what's unique about this church. I'll never forget, you'll see, on the back of an envelope while I was flying home from somewhere, I put that list together one time, and I've never been able to improve on it. So I just pull out that old envelope. It was about 13 things, and some of those things are things that people who have been in this church 110 years don't know, probably. So it's an interesting night next week. But to really, so tonight we really are talking, we're going to get into what is about this particular church and our relationship with CBF and Southern Baptist Convention and how this relates to the Southeastern Seminary. Anybody who moves into this community very appropriately, and I get the question all the time because you would expect it. They say, how does this church relate to the seminary? You would think a Baptist church on the campus of a Baptist seminary, there would be a huge relationship. And for over 100 years, that was the case. And now it's changed and has evolved. From where there was 20, 30 years ago, no relationship hardly at all, to now where there's an increasing relationship. And I want to just talk about, kind of walk all the way through that as best I can. You notice I don't have any notes. I lived this. So here's what we're talking about. To give you some historical perspective. Remember I said probably 2 weeks ago, the Southern Baptist Convention started in 1845. Our church here, Wake Forest Baptist, started in 1835. So we were around before even there was a Southern Baptist Convention. But 1845, and I don't know exactly, probably I'm sure it wasn't maybe exactly concurrent, but at some point, I'm sure very early on, Wake Forest Baptist Church joined and was a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. It was the only show in town, of Baptists. Now we said a couple weeks ago, they're all kind of Baptists, but Southern Baptists are the largest by far denomination and group of Baptists. So Wake Forest Baptist, for over 100, up until the 1990s, Southern Baptist Church. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. I expected to be Southern Baptist all my life. There was never anything else that you would be if you grew up Southern Baptist, as far as that kind of thing. So fast forward through all those years, almost 150 years, Southern Baptist Convention, which is literally what it says. Southern Baptist Convention is a convention. Like you go to a convention, it's a 3-day, or really more like 2, kind of 3-day meeting in June, different cities, different major cities that could host that many people. And they would meet for, idea through all those years was primarily for fellowship, for mission reports. Come on up here, you're in the hot seat. So now I have to change everything I was saying because Todd just showed up. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, so I was kind of, the historical perspective just started. And by the way, I'm not going to share that. We can talk. I'll tell you why afterwards. But anyway, so for 150 years, close to that Southern Baptist Convention, and one of the things that was always said about the Southern Baptist Convention was unity in diversity. It's always been the case that you've had, with 9 Baptists, you get 10 different opinions. That's Baptist. And if you want to know what it means to be Baptist, it means a lot of different voices, a lot of different opinions. But there was always a coming together out of a unity. What unified us was our love for Jesus and our love for missions. Those were the 2 unifying things. Everybody agreed on that. You could have still different views on a lot of different things, but there was a unity in diversity. So and just to give you an idea how I lived this, I graduated from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky with my Master of Divinity in 1980. The first inkling of something different just seeping in was in 1978 in Louisville, Kentucky, on the campus of Southern Seminary. I was there, I was in the room. They had planned what was called, in downtown Louisville, in the conference center, what was called the Heart of America Bible Conference. And this was a group of high-powered, big church, very conservative Southern Baptist pastors. Big name people who, in my world, had never even heard of, quite frankly, from very, very conservative churches and all this. And they were meeting in Louisville for a reason, because it was in the backyard of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, and which they believed increasingly was teaching very, very liberal interpretation of Scripture more than anything in theology, but mainly Scripture. Understand that there are 6 Southern Baptist seminaries across the country. We're obviously on the campus of one of those. And by the way, maybe just to go back, I don't want to ever assume you know anything. This was originally Wake Forest College, obviously, and then in the 1950s, everything moved to Winston-Salem, and Southern Baptist Convention bought the property and established the newest. Well, is Golden Gate newer than okay. So anyway, it was started in the late 50s, Southeastern Seminary here.
I think the seminary was actually on the campus before the college moved.
That's right. They overlapped at one point for a little bit. That's right.
So then when they left,
they took over. Right, take it over.
Take over. Let's use a different term.
Okay.
Expanded.
I tell you, Todd.
Mutual decision.
This is editorial. This is the.
One party bought it, another party sold it. So,
Anyway, well, and I maybe should say this, and I've already said this to Todd, that I'm not changing a thing because he's here, because we're brothers and we love each other, but I think it is important for you to understand. I am sharing it from my perspective, from my background, from how it is for me, and that's would not be the case. Everybody would not have the exact same perspective. But anyway, the seminary, Southeastern Seminary, as well as Southern Seminary, so were the 2 seminaries more than any others. There were varying degrees, but certainly more than any others, were considered by this more conservative element that was popping up in Southern Baptist life to be outside the boundaries of what they felt was orthodox teaching, interpretation of Scripture, ideally. And so this Heart of America Bible Conference, they came in. Well, the president of Southern Seminary very graciously offered, said, we'll save you money, you can come over and do everything in our chapel. And I was in the room with these preachers that basically got up in the pulpit of the Southern Seminary chapel and attacked Southern Seminary professors from the pulpit. And it was quite a scandal. It was, for me being from Virginia, it was preaching like I had never heard. I mean, I don't know what hellfire and brimstone, I hear people say that, but it was emotional, it was attacking, it was loud, it was all this. And so obviously that was the first inkling. That was in the late 80s. So you need to understand how things evolve, you got to understand the Constitution of the Southern Baptist Convention. The Constitution of the Southern Baptist Convention, because there had never been any problem at all, gave unimaginable power to the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, who is elected every year at the convention. It's usually a high-powered preacher, well-known preacher. So the president now, he has sole authority to then appoint who would be on what was called the Committee on Committees, which is kind of like what we think of as a nominating committee. Committee on Committees. And then the Committee on Committees would appoint the people who would be trustees for seminaries, Sunday school board, all the different agencies and all that. So what could happen if it ever was a desire, that person could appoint his people, and it was his, It wasn't a her. His people who could appoint their people, who could get all their people in positions of leadership and responsibility. And so they realized this, and they wanted to change. Their targets really were the seminaries. And so they wanted to, in the secular press, the word was takeover. I mean, it just was. That's just an objective statement. In the papers and all the news reports, it was called a takeover movement. And so in 1979, you had a large, huge megachurch, Bellevue Baptist in Memphis, Tennessee, Adrian Rogers was elected president of the Southern Baptist Convention. Nobody thought a whole lot about it. Never been any problem before who the president was, and so we got, he's from a more conservative group, but that happens. And he put together his people, and then the next year they did the same thing again with a different person, and then Adrian Rogers, I think, was elected again maybe the next year. But anyway, don't worry about all that. The point being that for a succession of years, this element of the Southern Baptist Convention, very, very conservative, was totally successful in year after year after year electing their person to be president. And it became very clear very quickly that they had an agenda. In fact, they felt that was a God thing, and that was an appropriate thing. And so they wasn't anything to hide. It was something to celebrate. And so they had an agenda, and that was to bring about more orthodox teaching in the seminaries, which meant that you would have to have different professors and different seminary, different administration and all this kind of thing. So what that meant was, and so by maybe the second or third year, it started becoming obvious, they're changing things. This is not just, the Committee on Committees that over the years would always appoint people from a broad spectrum of churches, diversity, everybody. There would be people from our church or people from somewhere like Richland Creek, which is, very Southern Baptist, what have you. But it's always, there was never this, little narrow group of people. By the second or third year, it became very obvious that this was happening and that there was this agenda. And so people such as myself, probably most in this church at that time, felt like, everything that we had celebrated and the good teaching that I had experienced at Southern Seminary was being threatened because they were starting to put in their agenda. Are everybody with me? Kind of, it's just. This is the first election was 1979, Adrian Rogers, 79, and it just continued. So easily 2 or 3 years into this, it became very obvious that they're trying to change everything that we had kind of valued. I say we, the moderate wing, and then again, I don't like the word moderate, but that's what we've been called. Moderate, conservative. Yeah, I always say that well, anyway, I'll come back to that because there were other labels that people put on it at times. Like moderates sometimes wanted to call this group fundamentalist, and fundamentalists wanted to call the other group liberals.
Sometimes you separate the syllables in fundamentalist.
Yes, there you go.
That's another story.
Right. I was joking. I'm glad. So within a couple of years, the moderate wing, which was a very, very huge element, realized, we've got to do the same thing they're doing. We got to get our person elected president. I mean, it was so, everything became very obvious. Everything rested on who got elected president, because then they, like I said, would have the authority to trickle down everything from there. So in the early 90s, you have never seen more political campaigning going on in any Republican Democratic political campaign than you saw going on with moderates and conservative. So let's just use those labels because they're not as strident, and I don't like, you know. So, I mean, at the time, I was in a tiny little church up in a county seat town up near Chesapeake Bay. And you could call me the precinct captain because my job was, we had a state person who had then somebody for every region and then somebody for every association. And the point was we would try to get as many people as we could to the national convention. Everything was based on that. And so Mark and Todd know this, but what you would not believe, for a couple of years, there were literally a Southern Baptist Convention meetings that had over 40,000 people in one room. And there would be buses coming in from every direction. And the really painful thing for many was that a lot of these, they bussed in for the vote on Tuesday afternoon for president, got right back on the bus and went home. Didn't stay for the convention, didn't stay for worship, didn't stay for fellowship. Came for one reason only. Let's get our...
The vote was not one vote per church, it was one vote per person.
Per person, yeah, but every church was only allowed so many messengers. So it wasn't an unlimited, like one church couldn't send 100 people.
So if our church had 10 messengers,
right.
We had 10 people there to vote.
That's right, yeah.
Now, what was the split
Okay.
of numbers between moderate and conservative at that time?
In those really big elections where it got to where there was politics on both sides, so every year it was literally the biggest gap there ever was 51 conservative, 49 moderate. One time it was like 50 point something, 49. I mean, it was close. Every year the moderates lost. You know, so does that answer your question? Yeah. So I mean, it was nip and tuck. I mean, it was.
If both sides voted their full potential.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if everybody could send everybody. So what you're really asking was, the Southern Baptist Convention as a whole, was it more conservative or more moderate as a whole?
It appeared.
I don't know.
I don't know. It appeared because of who won, it always appeared to be more conservative.
Well, but by a hair. I mean, it was really even. It was really close. You can imagine, as a moderate, driving to New Orleans with 3 other ministers, flying to Dallas, 40,000 people, and getting defeated so closely. Because for us, it felt like, we're losing our seminaries that have wonderful teachers, just great Bible teaching, something that we all felt good about, and we feel like we were losing it, So, so we did lose it. I mean, they were successful. And every year, and eventually, it took a while for the board of trustees, like for this seminary, to completely change over, because you would have so many per year. So you couldn't just wipe them all out in one year. You had to get eventually where you had a whole new board of trustees in, and that's what they did. And so, Randall Lally, who was the president of the seminary, that was in the early 90s, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but just how it affected here. I got my doctorate of ministry here at Southeastern in 1988. I was in the first commencement ceremony after the longtime president, Randall Lally, the moderate president, was gone. He was my president the whole time. And so I was with the brand new president who was only here for a little bit before then they brought in Paige Patterson. But how it affected this church, you can imagine. So you got this church, huge number of seminary professors and administration. Every president of Wake Forest College and Southeastern Seminary was a member of this church. So the first 2 presidents of the seminary were also pastors of this church. I mean, so there's a huge lineage and a huge connection of over 100 years, this church and Wake Forest College, and then Southeastern Seminary. But then when everything changed over, what that meant for this church. We're talking now we're talking early 1990s, kind of the heart of it, late 80s. What it meant was a whole lot of people who were members of this church were fired. Who were professors and administrators. They were fired. They were driven out. I mean, they were fired. There was no other way to put it. They were, or else they quickly took a job because they knew they would be fired. And so what that meant was a lot of leadership in this church, and a lot of just good friends. They worshiped together. Their kids were a youth group together. President of seminary, all these professors, world-class people. They had to leave because they had to have a job somewhere. So they went to other schools or other places of service and things like that. And so it was devastating for Wake Forest Baptist, not only because of what it meant in terms of loss of membership, but also the reasons for it. These were people that they had worshiped with, knew to be Christians, loving people, and here they were being driven out because this outside group was labeling them as liberals. Everybody with me, so you kind of get the flavor of how hard that was for this church. It was a mass exodus of leadership, of good friends, of people by an outside group who came in and took over and had no real affinity for the traditional ways that Wake Forest Baptists have been, the kind of Baptist Wake Forest Baptists had kind of, for the most part been. Now let me back up a little bit. I know I'm going back and forth, but because of all this increasingly successful takeover by a more conservative group for reasons they felt were very, led by God. I want to be, very faithful to them, and they were doing what they felt was the right thing for them. Eventually, churches like ours and hundreds of others realized we're not invited to the table anymore. They want our money. And again, I'm giving my perspective. I realize that they want our money. But I mean, this is reality. This is just what they do, of course, want our cooperative money. They wanted our mission money. But when I talked about committees on committees and all the different boards, they knew what churches were aligned and what their affinity was. In any church that was in their mind or in reputation of any moderate at all was just simply not invited at all. I mean, wholesale. I mean, it wasn't even subtle. And so churches like Wake Forest Baptist, churches like where I was in Virginia, and hundreds of other churches realized, we're going to these meetings year after year after year, and we're just getting shot down. We're the kind of convention that we've always been a part of and been invited to and fellowship with, and diversity. It's simply, we're not being celebrated at all or allowed to serve in any kind of leadership. And so eventually you get to the point and say, this just isn't us anymore. Who's in charge, and everything that they're doing, it's not the kind of Baptists we've always been. And so what do? You don't go to the convention anymore. Do you just have nothing at all to be a part of anymore? Well, out of that, a meeting was held, a famous meeting in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, by a group of about 13 moderate Baptist pastors, pretty big churches, pretty well known. They got together. They said, we're all hurting. We're all missing the fellowship that we've had. Let's just set up a meeting in Atlanta for no other reason, just to let people come and let us worship together and fellowship, So they did. They set it up in 1991, not expecting hardly anybody to come. We're still in the heart of all this going on. And I don't know, it was a large number. I can't remember how many came, but a lot more than was expected. And so the guy said, obviously this has met some need for what people are looking for that are a part of this new movement in the Southern Baptist Convention. And so they set up a meeting again the next year. I don't know where it was, maybe Atlanta again or somewhere. But anyway, it was more time to organize, more time to invite. And so all this group came together. And I think it was 1992, all this became a little more official. They started, we had some missionaries who were no longer a part of the International Mission Board who wanted to still do mission work. But anyway, out of this, so now they formed what was called the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. Hundreds of churches, certainly not even nearly as many churches as Southern Baptist Convention, still a much smaller group, but a lot of very influential churches. And so 1992, I mean, I was at that meeting, that now we have a new group that we can be a part of. And they, to this day, do not want to call themselves a denomination, but they are. I mean, they, in every way, they act like a denomination. They have the headquarters is in Decatur, Georgia. They have missionaries that go out. You know, we have a convention every year. I mean, it's just, and we have one of the missionaries right here in our room, and then we have a wonderful. This is what I love about Wake Forest Baptist. We got Todd and Mark. So we got.
I would say you got.
And I'm just sitting right here in the middle. That's where I am. So the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship was started. And I have to explain this, and I'm glad all of you are here because, why are we a part of Cooperative Baptist Fellowship? Because we wanted a place where we could have fellowship with like-minded people of similar Baptist heritage and beliefs. And it's not that, I always say, and I'm going all over the place, but I just want to be sure, well, let me come back later, our relationship with Southeastern Seminary now. But so Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, hundreds of churches. I always say, for instance, we're in good company. We're not some, I always worry when I'm with prospects that they're going to say, well, if we're not in that conservative group, does that mean we're liberal? Doesn't mean that at all. In fact, I mean, I hope most of you have heard me and been around me enough. I'm not a liberal, and but did mean that we share some similar, I think, Baptist history, some similar, views of what it means to be Baptist, as we've been talking about these days, and in North Carolina alone, for instance, every First Baptist church in North Carolina of every major city, with the exception of Charlotte, is a part of CBF. And so what that reveals is that a lot of these churches were historic churches who had a strong historic background in Baptist life, very entrenched in what it means to be Baptist and this kind of thing, and celebrated Baptist heritage kind of thing and all this. And we're not a part of that newer movement. And it is a newer movement. And again, I'm giving my perspective. I would say CBF represented churches that did not change. What changed was the Southern Baptist Convention. And I think that's a safe statement to say, because, I mean, I tell people when I became a part of a CBF church, I didn't change one single thing of what I was a Southern Baptist, and that's still true to this day. So that's part of why I get along with Southern Baptists. I mean, I've been that all my life, but anyway, we're in good company. A lot of churches, and so we have CBF of North Carolina, and we have national CBF, like I said, and missionaries, and very much like a denomination, So what does this mean for our relationship with Southeastern Seminary? Okay, in the late 80s, early 90s, when all these people, and so many of them were part of this church, were driven out for that reason, which was a hard reason for people in this church. It made for bad blood. Just couldn't help it. You got this outside group who came in and fired all of our friends and drove them out. It hurt our church. It hurt our friendships. We don't know these people. They said we're a bunch of liberals, all this stuff, It made for some real bad blood. So that was early 90s, okay. And that didn't just stop. Some might say there's still some of that a little bit going on even now. But I do want to say time heals a lot of things. The president of my commencement was just kind of a transitional guy, Louis Drummond. But then very quickly came in to the presidency here for quite a while was a man named Paige Patterson, who was, along with a judge named Paul Pressler, identified by all the secular press and everybody as being what they call the architects of the takeover movement. So if you're a moderate, Paige Patterson was not your favorite guy. In fact, he was kind of the poster child for everything that was wrong about this group, you know. And here now, he's in the president's house. And one of the great stories, and I like to call it the legends because it has just enough truth. Everybody likes to keep telling it, but it's not really totally true. And that is, everybody likes to say, well, oh, Wake Forest Baptist, that's the one who wouldn't allow Paige Patterson to join their church. Well, that's kind of true, but not totally. Because what the real story is Paige Patterson came here. And again, this is still on the heels of losing so many people, still a struggling relationship with this new group of people. And Paige Patterson and his wife, they approached the chair of deacons in this church to ask what would be the response of the church if they, in fact, attempted to join, walk the aisle during worship. The deacons got together, they had a meeting, and they let Paige Patterson know that he would not be accepted as a member of this church. Now let me be very fair to say, because I have a reputation of being very accommodating and reaching out to the seminary. Well deserved. but anyway, I do say to people, if I had been pastor at that time in the same circumstances, I would have said the same thing. And here's the reason. Because the tone of that time was so volatile. There was so much takeover. There was so much going on in the news about this new group and all that. The fear was, and it was a very understandable fear in that time, that if Paige Patterson had joined this church, the next week 50 students would join, the next week another 50, and by a month later they would have taken over this church. That was the fear, because they had taken over the seminary. And they made no bones about that. And so, again, I would have said no at the same, it would be probably the only time in my life I would say no to somebody about joining. But there was a reason that they said no, and there was an understandable reason. Just gives you an idea, though, of how volatile and how hard the feelings were at that time. Everybody with me? It was really a tough time for this church because of all the reasons. And Susan was here, y'all been, and I mean, it was
I think
something.
that's well portrayed. It never came to, you almost expected Paige Patterson to walk down the aisle. But
Yeah.
Never did.
He never did. That's right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that just gives you an idea. Right. I mean, so just want you to understand the history. So that was the early 90s. Paige Patterson, you know, the heat of those times, but time heals. And I think this part of the, Tom would most of all agree with me. That I hope we agree with most everything, but doesn't have to. Unity and diversity is what we used to do. So, but yeah, so the new president who came in about a year before I did, the present president, Danny Aiken, came in about a year before I came. So he came about 2004, I came about 2005. Different time. I wasn't here during the heat of it, although I was a doctoral student when, my chairperson had to leave in the midst of my doctoral work because he was fired like everybody else. But anyway, where was I going? Danny, thank you. So Danny gets here, and I get here. And I guess it's just in providential, and I don't want to toot my horn here, but I will say, when the search committee met with me, 2004, or 2005, I guess, early part of it, one of the very appropriate questions, I would have been shocked if they had not asked me this. They asked me, how do you expect to relate to Southeastern Seminary? Because of everything that I've just said. Am I going to come in? Am I going to be antagonistic? Am I going to be, putting up walls? Am I going to be, shooting arrows at them or just not get along? And my response, which should not be any big deal, it's just the way it should be. I said one thing. I said, I hope like a Christian. That was my response. And my first day here, I wanted, and did, went straight to Dr. Daniel Akins. He's a friend of mine. He's Danny to me. I don't, he's not my president. He's my friend. He's my brother in Christ. So went over to Danny's office, and but I'd already gone in my office, and I wanted to, we laugh about this because I wanted to beat him. I wanted to be the first to be able to say I reached out to him before he did to me. But it just, which is stupid, but anyway. But he had already, when I got in my office on my very first day, there was a letter on my desk from Danny saying, look forward to building a relationship and friendship. I went over there the very first day and communicated the same thing. And he and I have had a very, very good relationship, trusting, respectful. I always say there's nobody, maybe now there is, I hope, but I always say for years there's nobody on that campus who is more endorsing our church than the president of the seminary, because he knows me. He knows we're not, for him, just a CBF church. We're brothers in Christ, and we both love Jesus, and we love missions and all that kind of thing. So the relationship, while it is true that still hardly any, if at all, through the years, students come to our church, because they are out of Southern Baptist backgrounds, and they're hoping to go out in Southern Baptist careers, and we are more. We still affiliate with the Southern Baptist Convention, and when I say that, one of the ways that's defined is what we give in mission money. We give a certain portion to Southern Baptist Convention. We give a much larger portion to the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, for all the reasons. So I pretty much want people to know we're a CBF church. And I don't mind them knowing that we have Southern Baptist Convention still connections also. But most of you, unless you're just brand new, so what does that mean for our church? I've been here, 7 or 8 years or however long. And this is part of the story most of y'all already know, and I don't want to, but the nice thing was our church has grown a lot. We needed space, building space. We had nowhere to build, nowhere. 5 feet out from the building. And by the way, Wake Forest Baptist Church, this should be said, has never been owned by either the college or the seminary. It's always a completely independent congregation that just happens to be certainly on the campus. If you're inside the rock wall, you're on the campus. But we have never been owned or controlled by them, always independent. That's an important thing to hear. But anyway, we needed more space, and we looked at behind the office house. We looked at buying the house where the Tedders now live. None of all those were across the street. We had no options, and it never entered our mind, just given the long history, and also, quite frankly, some overtures that had been made in other years for the same hope of land, that there was no reason to believe that was even something worth pursuing. But when you get desperate, you do anything. And so I just went to Danny Aiken, and I had a developer in our church said, listen, we're the only buyer. They could sell it to us for $100,000 an acre. And we would have done it. We would have had to, because it would have been worth it, But I went over there, and the long story short, Danny was immediately open to, considering it, which was a celebration right there. And then, through all the steps, and eventually I met with the trustees. And because of Danny and because of Ryan Hutchinson, his vice president, who both knew me and I knew them and had a good relationship, they trusted us. They believed that we're doing the kingdom's work, which is what we're all about here. That they gave the land, that we're sitting in for $1. And that made all the news, made the front page of the Wake Weekly. I'm going to give you an article. It made an article, a Virginia Baptist paper was written. What it represented and what it still represents, and what is so important to me, and I'm looking at my brother here, this building represents walls that have come down between the church and the seminary. It doesn't mean that we don't have some distinct beliefs, sometimes different, but it does mean that we are coming together in appreciation, respect, very important word, respect, and commonality on the things that really matter, as far as I'm concerned, love of Christ and people coming to Christ. That's what we're all about. There's no division between us and them. Maybe different methods, maybe different style or something, and there are some differences. You know, when people ask me, well, what's the difference between Wake Forest Baptist and Southeastern? You know, one of the easier ones is, and this is just common knowledge, and I say this very respectfully, you know, we believe that God calls women into ministry. The teaching over there, for the most part, does not, and I know what the biblical teaching, you know, biblical verses are that they get there from, and I know what we get our view from, you know. So that's one of the easier ones to talk about. There are some probably differences that are more nuanced as well, you know, and everybody's different, you know. So, but the beauty of it is that,
Can I say one
yes,
thing about that? Because
yes.
I don't want to I don't want to leave them with the wrong impression.
Okay.
Because the seminary's teaching is not that women are not called to ministry,
Right.
but it's specifically to the role of pastor.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you.
So
That's important.
I mean, because
Right.
we have
Right.
almost as many female students as we have male students.
Right,
So they're all
right.
celebrated.
Somebody told me today that there's a woman just elected a chair of the board of trustees. Is that right? Which was hard to imagine. You haven't heard that?
We've had female
Yeah,
trustees.
okay.
Certainly, but I don't know about.
Well, anyway, it doesn't matter.
We've got female faculty members.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, got one sitting here. Yeah, in the college, right? Are you still right now teaching? Yeah. So Sally is a teacher, a professor in the college. Yeah. Well, still. I'm trying to make it sound really good. Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the long and short of it. Probably more the long of it. That we've come this far. The relationship between us and the seminary. There's always going to be some distinctions, but yeah, I've gotten to know faculty. I had lunch with Todd and the provost actually of the seminary the other day, and really enjoyed that. And there's an increasing. I say, and again, this is just me talking, that I say the long timers, because a lot of you who are newer, very appropriately, you don't really care about Southern Baptist Convention and CBF. I said it. It's true. It really is true.
For example, I was on a finance committee in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And we had some very heated discussions about where our money went.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, and it should matter. But I am saying realistically, a lot of people come into this church, they don't know what CBF or SBC and all that, and they certainly don't know what I'm telling you tonight. And they are coming in because they have good experience of worship, or they like the music or the youth or children's ministries, or a lot of them coming from other denominations. That they didn't come and say, oh, this is a CBF church, that's why I want to go there. Now there are some that do that. I don't want to say, but not many. Or that this is a church that gets along with the seminary. Well, that's why I want to go there. That's not the main reason most people are coming here, and that's just understandable. That's true if you move to any city. There's a kind of a common reason you find a church, But so anyway, that's our relationship with Southeastern Seminary. It continues to improve, and so we got some time. What do you want to add to that? Yeah.
Everything Bill said is a lie. No, I was thinking, as you were telling the story, though, I'm thinking through this, though, and when you were talking about that meeting that happened in 1978 on campus, I was in the 8th grade. So I was in the 7th grade that year, and I went to my phone. Well, I didn't want to say it quite that way, but I was thinking of my own story. I grew up in California. I was born and raised in California. We just didn't have the denominational issues there, at least in the same way. I do remember the reason I made that comment about the word fundamentalist is I have this distinct memory of going to an associational meeting when I was probably in elementary school, and there was a preacher that came in to preach at this meeting, and I didn't know. No, I don't know that anyone knew Well, certainly I didn't when I was in elementary school. I didn't know all these issues that were going on. And he started talking about the fundamentalists, and then he started separating the word into different syllables and explaining what each syllable meant and all of this. I just have this distinct memory of him as a young person hearing that and thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're obviously very excited about something, but I don't know what it is. And anyway, so I'm growing up in California at a very small church. We didn't have political issues at all. When I started going to seminary, I finished college, and there was a gap of time before I started seminary. And so I started seminary at Golden Gate Seminary in California in 1993. And so it was right after that had happened. But I was probably one of these people, I wouldn't have known what the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship was. I wasn't aware of these issues that was going on. I was a Baptist, and I thought we were all Baptist and Southern Baptists. And, so I went through seminary there, becoming aware of some of the issues, particularly with women in ministry. My wife Timberly, I met while we were in seminary there together. And I probably shouldn't, well, especially since it's being recorded, I shouldn't tell stories about Timberly, but I don't think she'd mind me telling you this. There was a group of women on campus at Golden Gate that were very excited about this issue of women in ministry, and there was quite a bit of tension. And Timberly she just said, that's not my soapbox. I'm not interested in that. She had already served as a journeyman with the Foreign Mission Board at the time and was just preparing to go back. She wanted to be a missionary again, go back overseas. And she said, I'm really not interested in these issues. And I think some of the girls in the dorm got a little mad at her about that because she wouldn't join in with them. But anyway, we finished seminary. I was looking on my phone while you were talking because I wanted to check a date. Did that bother you? The president at Golden Gate at the time was Bill Cruz. And I don't know if you know him or anything about him. I wasn't sure when he came to the seminary. He actually came to Golden Gate at 1986. And so it was certainly before, Page and before Al Mohler at Southern, all of those things. But, Bill Cruz was a very conservative pastor. And anyway, so I'm coming out of that context. I moved to Louisville, Kentucky to do my PhD. I had no idea what I was doing, what I was kind of dropping myself into. I did not know what the issues were going on at Southern. I knew there was disruption, but I wasn't really aware of the issue, things going on. That was in 1997, I guess, that we arrived there in Louisville. Found out pretty quickly what the issues were, and I think I started deciding for myself at that time that that the conservative side of these issues were where my heart was. That's where I felt that. See, but at that point, all of the fighting was over, in a sense. And so I was just there kind of looking at the battlefield, afterwards and saying, okay, where are my convictions here? And they seem to be more here. I think the reason I tell that story, though, is because I've always been a bit of an outsider in whatever situation I'm in. And so I think I feel at home with people that are different than me, if that makes sense. We finished in Louisville, Kentucky. We went with what was then the International Mission Board. We spent about 6 years in Indonesia. Through some events that happened there. That's a whole other story, but we ended up coming home from there and then moved to Wake Forest in 2009. I took a teaching position in Old Testament and Hebrew at the seminary. We became members of another very large Southern Baptist church in town, and I'll just leave it at that. We decided about a little over a year ago that we needed to leave that church. Again, longer story that I won't go into now. There wasn't problems there or anything, but it was just an issue that we felt we needed to go ahead and move on. And we looked at several churches. We weren't thinking about coming to Wake Forest Baptist, but we came to the Maundy Thursday service a year ago. And we left the church, and we were walking across not across the parking lot, we were walking out of the front of the church over to where we parked in front of my office building at Stevens Mackey. My wife said, well, what do you think? And I said, I'm really mad right now.
We do that to people.
Well, no, you make me mad, but for other reasons. But she said, why are you mad? And I said, because this was such a beautiful service. And I said, how come their side gets all of the beautiful worship and all we get are rock bands? And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And I have a music background. That was my major in college, and I'll leave it at that. And so she asked me then, is there any chance that we could join this church? And I said, no, we can't join a CBF church. I can't do it and keep my job at the seminary. What I didn't know at the time is that the church was dually aligned. And so when we went out to breakfast then with Bill, and I have no idea what time it is, so I don't know. Okay. We went out to, well, actually before meeting with Bill, 15? Okay, sorry. Actually before meeting with you, I'm trying to think of the timeline exactly, but I actually went to Danny Aiken and I went to Bruce Ashford, and I talked to both of them, and I said, listen, here's kind of what we're thinking about. Is this even a possibility? And Bruce Ashford, that we had lunch with the other day, he was like positively enthusiastic. He said, that would be great. He goes, you want to join there? That would be great. That would be wonderful. And Danny was like, yeah, if you want to, that's fine. And but he was very affirming of it. But Bruce was really excited about it. And you met Bruce now. Bruce is like you. Bruce is a bridge builder, I think. He has his convictions, but he wants to see, he likes communication. He likes to have people getting in the same room together. He wants, to tear down some of the walls that are dividing us with conviction. And so then we had breakfast. Bill was explaining to me about the makeup of the church. He said, well, he goes, I want to make sure it's clear. He goes, we are dually aligned. He said, but, and I'll have to work with the microphone here. He said, we're this much CBF and we're this much SBC. And I said, well, that's okay, but that's the church I'm joining then. I'm joining the SBC part of your church. And he goes, well, that's all right, but I've been very welcome here, and actually started teaching a Sunday school class here before we became members. I don't know if that was the wise thing to do or not, but but it's been really good, and I've had a good opportunity to talk to students at the seminary, about the church. A lot of people, when they find out that I'm here, they want to know why. Some people are more positive in that question than others. And, but it's a good opportunity to say, I'm at the church. We came to the church because of the worship, I'll be honest, and because of the spirit that was here. But I'm really enjoying being in a situation where we do have differences of opinions, and we're able to listen to each other. I always remind Bill, I said, listen, I'm an inerrantist, I'm a complementarian, if you know what those terms are. If I can do that at your church, then I'm fine. And if other people are not inerrantists, that's okay. I can live with that. I think you're wrong, but you would think I'm wrong, and that's okay. We can still love each other and then move along, right? And I think there's students at the church, at the seminary. I think there's a lot of students that would really be seeking out an environment like this. They probably don't know that they can come here because that's probably not communicated real well, not necessarily from the church, but maybe from all sides. And but I think they would probably be at home here. They would probably like this sort of environment, So I don't know. I'm optimistic in being here, and I don't want to make my presence here bigger than it is, but But I'm optimistic that perhaps this could be the beginning of a beautiful relationship. Good to give a Casablanca line there.
You're
As I said before, to me, and I could not be more honest, this is the way I'm wired, that more than we are CBF or more than we're Southern Baptists, we are God's children. We're God's family. You know, and there are camps, there are things that part of what we grew up with that mattered and things like that. And I'm not discounting any of those things, but they aren't the main thing. You know, and I've, you know, Todd has been such a gift for me because it's all about what I want all of us to be about, because we do have differences. I mean, Todd will tell you, I have never changed one tune of anything with him about who we are, nor has he, and that's the only way to.
Get you to, but you won't.
Yes, sorry about that. So let's stop for questions or comments, or did somebody have their? Oh yeah, Larry. Who is Todd? Let's see. Well, I mean, I think part of what's very unique and why I had him come here is because he is a seminary professor, Southern Baptist Convention, seminary professor of Old Testament. I've been here 12 years. I've been here 12 years. I mean, Sally is a seminary, a college professor adjunct, and no buts, but this is a full-time, been through all the Southern Baptist seminaries and, is employed over there. And they sign what do they call that thing? You all sign, Baptist Faith and Message and all that. So that's the deal. But I haven't had one person say to me, why do we have him in our, like it's this alien coming in here, I haven't had it, it's been very much celebrated, So Sally, right. Oh, I think we need to continually monitor that, and there are certainly, which you may be alluding to, I don't want to get into too much, there are certain recent developments in CBF life of doctorate and practice and whatever that are creating headaches and creating discussions for, to what degree do we, So that's true for everything. The reality is, I hope this doesn't be misunderstood. There's no perfect There's no perfect group out there. There's not a cookie cutter. So there's things in CBF, and I say this to anybody that I don't connect with. As there are things in Southern Baptist Convention growing up, or at any time, and so it's more. What do we, the larger, in the bigger picture, what do we find the most affinity for? What are the reasons for that? Continue to monitor that and make sure that we, given the huge diversity in this church, this is the other part of the challenge, that we really do have, you name any issue, we have it from here to here. I wish it were a little more some days, but all other days I'm really glad for the diversity. We can learn from each other and all this kind of thing, But I think I get what your question is, and there's part of me sometimes I wish that, I don't know how this makes sense, that there was just a Wake Forest Baptist belief, kind of thing, and that, because ultimately, I'm about Wake Forest Baptist even more than I'm about CBF or SBC. That's where my heart is, Wake Forest Baptist.
It should be, right? That's
well, I would hope
faith.
so. Why would it not be? I live with y'all. Y'all care about you. But there are associations. Again, there's things Southern Baptist life and CBF life that I don't agree with.
But what I was getting at, I guess, biblically, that first association is with your church.
That's right.
You're
and I think we've talked about, and probably I think will come to more of a statement of beliefs kind of thing, which you have to be very, very careful with, because Baptists are not creedal people. So it's not, you sign the dotted line if you're a member of this church for A, B, C, D. But it is to say to a prospect or somebody else, here's kind of a pretty good framework, of what we believe biblically to be, the gospel. And,
I had breakfast this morning with Tommy Killebrew.
Okay, that's her dad. and her husband. So you still want to talk about it?
Okay. Well, thanks for telling me that. Okay.
Yeah. Just from personal experience, I wanted you to know.
No, we had a great time though, but we were talking about this issue of a confession and a creed,
Yeah.
and like I think if I could frame it this way, a creed is sort of written
Yeah.
as a document. Okay, here's what you need to do in order to enter. In
Yeah.
a sense.
Yeah, good way.
But a confession is a statement moving outwards to
Yeah.
say to others, these are the things that we believe.
Right,
These
yeah.
are the things that we stand
And I do like using the word framework or something. I don't want to say, it's not set in stone, but it's kind of it's a good picture.
Right.
Yeah, that probably is an evolving picture. I'm a different person than I was 20 years ago. I hope I'll be different 20 years from now. Although I would hope that some foundational beliefs will never change.
Right.
But anyway, any other questions or comments? This is kind of tonight is this is a lot of territory and a lot of I was on the so CBF started in 1992, and again we have a missionary here, so we give our mission money, which is what Baptists do to support. It goes out for leadership, but it goes out for a lot of missionaries. And Mark Wyatt, who is doing an absolutely incredible work, this is what I love about CBF. And Mark resettles, and his wife Kim resettle refugees here in the Triangle area. And they do real stuff every day. Some days I wonder what I do, but they do real stuff. They are relocating refugees from all over the world. It's an incredible ministry. And so that's what our mission money is going to, and our money going to Southern Baptist Convention, helping pay his salary. But it's going to all the Southern Baptist entities, which includes the seminaries and the mission agencies and all that.
Our money a little different. Get it to go all to Todd's salary.
There you go.
On behalf of Todd, I certainly hope you don't do that. My salary, too. I would like to keep
So what I want to give you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there somebody? Yeah. Hard for me.
Sometimes I think we're making mountains.
Yeah. Well, and I always say this is why, like I especially say with Danny and me, and certainly Ty, what we agree on is so much more than what we disagree on. I mean, that is hardly worth talking about what we disagree. Although, those are things that matter, but they pale in comparison to what we agree on. I mean, when I get with Danny, we're not adversaries at all. We both love Jesus. We love missions. I mean, that's the two things that really bind us together. And what I have here is the founding coordinator, I think his title was, executive coordinator, Daniel Vestal of CBF. And this is just a little statement of, it kind of talks about what we believe is CBF. And again, there is everything from here to here. So this is kind of a framework. Again, maybe you might say, I made a copy of this. This is, quite frankly, an article I love. This is from the Virginia Baptist paper, Religious Herald, and they came down to interview because what was, I don't want to toot horn or anything, but it really is a little unique in Baptist life. I mean, I've been on the National Coordinating Council of CBF, and of course the seminary president. So we both have had some real pretty high leadership roles, in that we get along with each other. And that's what I wish for all Baptists. I mean, that's what we're saying, that we are not over here and over here. We're all God's family.
Yeah. And this is unique here. There is no other campus that has a church on the grounds.
Of all the 6 seminaries,
This is the only one.
one that has a congregation on the campus. Yeah. And that's why when all this, without being overly dramatic, when I said, when the whole Southern Baptist Convention changed, whatever word you want to use, really, without being dramatic, there was probably no church in Southern Baptist life that was affected more than this church because of its location. Yeah, if I think I have enough for everybody. If it starts getting low, share with, if you're with a spouse. Thank you all for coming. I can stick around if anybody just has something burning to ask, but we're 10 minutes over time. I appreciate. Next week we talk about what is unique about this church. A lot of the things that are unique are because of its location with the campus, and we'll talk about some of that. So thank you. Good night. Okay.